Olympics has been a mess. It's truly been a mess these days. Trains getting messed up by terrorist organizations. The athletes are getting robbed as they're trying to come to Paris to compete. They said the Seine might not even be in good condition for all these different athletes who need to swim. You have men who are competing against women in boxing. And now at the Paris Olympics, apparently they allow predators, actual pedophiles, to compete. And that's how we get to the story of Steven Van de Velde. I hope I said his name correctly. Actually, I hope I said his name incorrectly. He's a goddamn predator, and he's actually competing at the Olympics. Now, he is getting a little bit of pushback from the crowd, luckily. They are booing him. He is competing on behalf of the Netherlands in beach volleyball. Here's a clip of him out there. You will hear the boos. So you'll hear the boos from the crowd there, and, you know, reasonably so. You do have an actual convicted child predator who has been allowed to compete in the Olympics. And we'll get into the story a little bit here. As things just get crazier and crazier and crazier. It says Dutch volleyball player Steven Van de Velde, who has sparked global controversy for being allowed to compete in the 2024 Paris Olympics despite his child rape conviction, was met with boos and some cheers in France Wednesday as he was introduced before his second match of the games. Walking ahead of his partner, Matthew Immers, a match against the Chilean national team, Van de Velde was met with a loud response. Of course, the inclusion of Van de Velde, who was convicted of raping a 12-year-old when he was 19 years old in 2014, has sparked a global controversy that forced a spokesperson of the International Olympic Committee to comment and defend his inclusion. Mark Adams, spokesperson for the IOC, told reporters that while the committee was not necessarily, quote, comfortable and happy, end quote, with the decision, the IOC defers to national Olympic committees to choose their athletes and acknowledge the Dutch committee did its due diligence in allowing Van de Velde to compete. Van de Velde admitted to having sex with the girl after meeting her online in 2014. He has avoided media during his time at the Olympics so far, and his teammate Immers has said he, quote, wants to rest his mind, end quote. So speaking of athletes forced into really weird positions, that really sucks for his teammate. Not only are you being pushed into competing alongside an actual child rapist, but what the hell is going on in the Netherlands that they're allowing this guy to compete? And it's not just some like, oh, I'm sitting on the fence as to whether or not he actually committed this crime. He admitted to sleeping with a 12-year-old. He actually traveled to see the 12-year-old to sleep with her when he was 19 years old. And at the time, he was looked at as somebody who was going to be an Olympian. He was headed to the Olympic level in his sport. And the judge who convicted him of this crime said, quote, prior to coming to this country, you were training as a potential Olympian. Your hopes of representing your country now lie as a shattered dream. Now, boy, was that judge wrong, because Steven Van de Velde was allowed to compete on behalf of his country and represent the Dutch at the Olympics. Not only that, he was sentenced to 4 years for sleeping with a 12-year-old, raping a 12-year-old. He only served 12 months at the Dutch prison and has since been allowed, of course, to rehabilitate his Olympic career, sealing his spot in the national pair at the Paris Games alongside Matthew Immers. Now, there's something to be said for, you know, people can rehabilitate and see themselves on the other side of a crime and really learn how wrong it was, what they actually did, and maybe lead a whole new life. This one doesn't make sense to me. You know, I'm often open to stories of rehabilitation and turning a new leaf, and he very well could have turned a new leaf after being convicted of raping a 12-year-old. I don't think that that qualifies you or that you should be allowed to then represent your country in the Olympics. You know, separate from his ability within the sport is the fact that you are representing your country. Olympians are not only just meant to be, you know, good at their sports, they're meant to be a representative of the country that they're representing, a role model of sorts. I don't think somebody who slept with a 12-year-old is exactly a role model. And I don't know what the Dutch people who were the ones responsible for choosing these athletes were thinking, especially when sort of baked into his conviction was this idea that he was not supposed to represent his country at the Olympics. It truly is disgusting. I don't know how the registry works in the Netherlands for people who are sex offenders, but you would think that he shouldn't be allowed to be in the vicinity of children. And there are actual children, minors, and young women in particular, who are competing at the Paris Olympics, some of them who are around the same age of the young girl who he raped. So why is he allowed to be within the vicinity? Now, I have heard stories that he is being escorted to and from places with security, given the nature of the crime he's committed and all the different controversies surrounding him, but he should have never been allowed to compete in the Paris Olympics at all. Even if he served his time, you should no longer be able to represent your country with this being the case. Actually disgusting.
Yeah, and I think it's really an indictment against, well, several things. The IOC apparently deferred to the national federations, as the article said. So it's an indictment against the Dutch Volleyball Federation for allowing this to happen, or the Dutch Olympics Committee for sending this person. I happen to be an enthusiast of the sport of beach volleyball. I didn't know this about this player in particular, but I have seen him compete in other tournaments. And I can tell you that the Netherlands does have other professional beach volleyball teams that are meet the threshold of being qualified to compete that they could have sent instead. Now, he did earn it in volleyball terms, but even so, you had other options, and sending him knowing this is an indictment against them. And I think it's also an indictment against the Dutch prison system, the Dutch legal system, whatever you call it. I mean, this is one of the most reprehensible things that a human being can do to another human being, let alone a child. Like, short of murder or like permanently maiming someone, there's almost nothing worse that you could possibly conceive of that one human being could do to another. And the idea that someone like that has done something like this to a 12-year-old only serves 1 year in prison is just unconscionable. And I think just as decent human beings, we ought to know that on an intuitive level. And I think most of us do. According to you guys in the chat, it looks like 96% are saying he should not be allowed to compete in these Olympic Games. And, you know, this is just a gut check, reality check moment. And I also, how do you think his victim feels in light of all of this? I mean, how do you think the victim feels about her country allowing this person to only serve 1 year in prison and then also sending him to the world stage to represent the country? How does committing an act like he committed not disqualify him permanently? I do not understand. This, in my mind, is just a case of being so open-minded that our brains fall out, so progressive, so confident in this sort of utopian idea that we can rehabilitate people, and we have in our justice system the ability in 1 year to erase something like this. It's not justice, and I don't think it's very acceptable at all.
Yeah, it's not acceptable, especially, like, I'll go ahead and just give you, to close out this story, the details of the crime that he actually committed. He met this 12-year-old girl online in 2014, flew from Amsterdam to London to meet with this girl, which is exactly what these weirdo creeps do on, like, the predator confrontation videos you see on the internet. This is what this guy is. He's a straight-up predator who actually went through with raping this 12-year-old and then advised her to get a morning after pill. And it wasn't until staff at the family planning clinic alerted her family and the police to what has gone on that he actually ended up being caught. And again, only served 1 year instead of the 4 that he was sentenced with. Should have been sentenced with far more. He should have been sentenced with enough to where he couldn't have been competing in the Olympics because he was in prison. That's how that should have went down. But here we are, and he is out there roaming free. Not only is he roaming free, he's got a very successful Olympic career representing the Netherlands. Y'all, I don't know what's going on at the Olympics. Just crazy story after crazy story after crazy story. So yeah, he deserves more than just a few boos, but that's what he's getting right now.